the impact of COVID-19 on the medical device industry.
Hi, good morning. Today we'll be discussing the impact of COVID-19 on the medical device industry. Together on the panel I am joined with Professor Anthony Serracino from the University of Malta, Dr. Christopher Barbara, the Chairperson of the Department of Pathology at Mater Dei, Karen Farrugia, Senior Pharmacist at the Medicines Authority, and myself, Julian Fearne, also Senior Pharmacist from the Medicines Authority. COVID-19 has had a great impact on the economy and on the industry of medical devices throughout. It has had an impact on healthcare facilities, from hospitals to clinics, and it also had an impact on manufacturers. Manufacturers are finding it hard to find raw products, are finding it hard to keep up with demand, and this is also translating down the line in the supply chain to distributors, to procurement, and whatnot. COVID-19 has also had a major impact on the regulatory scene. The medical device regulation was due to come out in 26 May 2020, and it has been postponed by a year to 26 May 2021. Maybe Karen wants to speak a bit more in detail about this point.
Yes, in fact, the postponing of the new regulation on medical devices was due to a fear on the shortages of medical devices, that they wouldn't conform with the new regulations. And so European Parliament actually agreed to postpone it by a year to May 2021.
Is it true that this was also the reason, since the MDR is much more robust and much more heavy in the regulations than the directives, that there would have been a shortage when it comes to
medical devices in general, especially those used for the actual COVID-19 pandemic?
All right. In terms of domestic manufacturing and ad hoc manufacturing, as we said, there is a large demand for PPEs in the market. The regulations being postponed has allowed the directives and the route of certification to be as is, which is much more lenient. We are currently seeing a large number of domestic and manufacturing popping up in countries around Europe where we're being affected. Maybe Professor Inglott has something to add about standards and how healthcare authorities are tackling such ad hoc manufacturing.
Yes, from a regulatory point of view, from a quality point of view, in this, if there was anything that we saw in this pandemic, it was that one had to rethink, reformulate, redesignate things all throughout. If you look, for example, even if you start from the beginning, any product that you have starts with research. We connect a lot of research with medicines, for example, but it's the same for medical devices. You need that basic research, you need the applied research. And what happened is, in this COVID, was that we had to curtail this in time. Hopefully, we did not curtail it in quality, hopefully. This could learn. Probably the end result of all this would be to go halfway. Maybe taking 10 to 15 years to develop a product was a little bit too much. But now going to less than a year might be going to the other extreme to guarantee quality. It's the same with research. For example, we had a lot of what we call in research as preprints. Preprints means that you publish it without a comprehensive peer review. And I mean, some of them were very helpful because one could see what other people were doing. But on other cases was that we had preprints that lacked the robustness that is needed in this field. And it's the same when we go to tests. It's the same when we are going with vaccines, for example, at the European Medicines Agency Management Board, of which I form part. There is a lot of effort to ensure that the quality in the registration process and the quality in the assessment process is kept there. and also that there is an amount of independence of the people who are doing assessment. Now, this is the impact that we are seeing now. So the challenge that we are facing is that we have to be robust. On the other hand, we have to be realistic in time, and this would affect us on how much we decide, for example, how much false positives, how much false negatives will we tolerate. What is most dangerous, to have 5% false positives or to have 10% false negatives, for example. All these philosophical aspects will come into being, and they are challenging the not only the capabilities, the technological capabilities of society, but even the intellect in taking these decisions on whom life or death could depend.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, can I add on, Professor, to what Professor Serracino Inglott has just said? Because with the first wave that we had with COVID, where we were already observing what was happening in China, in Italy, in France, in Spain, we had already started preparing to make ourselves ready for diagnosis of cases, for testing and contact tracing. This is before we had the first case. Having a good supply of disinfectants available. I still remember contacting Professor to get the recipe from the pharmacy department, according to World Health Organization, to manufacture ourselves our hand rub, okay? And thank you for giving us all the help we could. But then we had to go to the procurement department to get the raw materials. So when the outbreak started in Malta, then we already had the basic materials available. I had already made contracts with the companies to do the real-time polymerase chain reaction test. We were looking at studying our positive cases to check their antibody titers. And all this can happen using teamwork, a team of people who are engineers, who are capable of manufacturing even locally, of the pharmacists who are really capable of telling us about all the medicines we require, all the alcohol rubs, all the disinfectants, all the antibiotics in cases of secondary infection. And we had to make sure that all the items which we required, the pharmaceuticals, as well as the medical devices, were in place. In the meantime, the engineers were going around the hospital, creating more hospital beds with oxygen points in areas which we would never have imagined, like lecture rooms. The library in medical school has been converted to a ward with oxygen points and so on, which we are today using. So this preparedness was not for nothing. It's all very useful materials which are being done. But this has all to come with teamwork, not only locally, because I am sure I have every 2 days meetings with WHO, with ECDC, and discussing with other virologists in member states on their findings. We've seen so many findings which were true, others which were false. We've ordered a few items which we thought would help in the treatment of COVID-19, which ultimately we found were not really the real treatment for the disease, for the infection. So we have ordered even some items which we cannot use. We have to look as well at some kits which came from abroad, which in their literature did not really confirm what we tried and the validation as well. So this is why it's important that we talk to each other as specialists in the area, so that we share as much information as we have as possible. So if I did one mistake, my colleague will not do the same, or I will not do the mistake which my colleague did. And altogether, I think this has worked really well. Like today, virtually, we're giving all the hints that are from our experiences to others.
And then there were the things that we normally take as obvious. We nearly forget about them. For example, the normal supply of quality oxygen, for example, which had this requirement, which we all knew these oxygen points, which were more or less unplanned from the point of view that they were not planned with the establishment of the hospital, if you have a library. And then you have to test these. You have to purge, for example, all the systems, and you have to purge them with oxygen. So you have to calculate not only on the consumption of oxygen, but also on the amount of oxygen you needed to test the systems to ensure that the system is working properly, so that when you come to use it, you will find it in good order. Some of the oxygen, for example, we import. So you had to see that the places where you are importing this oxygen is producing enough, because probably the demand would not be only increasing from Malta, but it would be increasing. We get the oxygen from Italy, for example, and Italy at that time was requiring huge amounts of oxygen. We were also becoming used, for example, for the oxygen in being piped at Mater Dei Hospital. But we had to start thinking of people requiring maybe supply of oxygen, higher supply of oxygen in tanks, for example, for the nursing homes, which may not have piped oxygen. So you have to think of these things that do not occur immediately as possibly for use, and similarly with several other mundane things that one would normally take them for granted.
If I can add further to what Dr. Barbara was saying on the sharing of information, what's very interesting on a European level, practically on the regulatory point of view, the EU member states were part and are still part of a subsection of the Medical Device Coordination Group. Practically one particular subgroup is dedicated to in vitro diagnostics, where COVID tests are involved. And during this pandemic, every week there were teleconferences with different member states and obviously different national competent authorities. Malta, one of them obviously, was following these groups, and there was sharing of information, so national strategies, what was going on, information on the actual COVID tests, reliability, specificity, and all these aspects which helped different authorities and are still helping. These groups are still going on, but it helps different authorities cope in such situations and getting the latest information at hand.
Yes.
Perhaps one thing that came good out of this situation, where we think, is that we felt all along, both regulators and academic people, the importance, the relevance of communication.
Yeah.
We had to feel people close to us, and this was not, in Malta, being a small country, we always like to communicate, and we always communicate with several places as a matter of course. But I was happily noting that even big countries now felt that need that we usually used to feel as a small nation, as a group. But now this need was felt by everybody. Nobody was too big not to consult anybody else, and so you would be witnessing around discussion tables, round executive meetings, such as in EMA or in other bodies, where you would have seen everybody now participating. Everybody was feeling that he's in the same boat, looking out for knowledge, looking out for things, and looking out how to cooperate and to understand one another.
Yes, as some very important points have been raised: teamwork, quality. As Karen said, from the Medical Device Coordination Group, or the MDCG, they have been meeting. The groups have been set up from 2017, and they've been meeting on a bi-yearly basis ever since. As Karen said, the IVD working group, specifically because of the COVID test, has been meeting weekly, with very much increased frequency, every week, every other week,
till
2
July,
times a week,
yes,
if need be. And from that you can see that there's a lot of sharing of data, a lot of sharing of knowledge. There are a lot of sharing of fraudulent tests, where there is tests where people unfortunately are taking advantage of the market, taking advantage of
the shortage as well that there was.
And are creating fraudulent tests, which at the end of the day only serves to create a larger impact of COVID-19. I think you can very easily say that tests that were developed earlier during the first wave of the pandemic, as opposed to tests that are being developed today in the second wave, have a much higher percentage of reliability, a much higher percent of assurance. I know for a fact that Malta was doing some validity testing on some of the tests. I don't know if Dr. Chris Barbara.
Yes, Julian, this is what you're saying is very important, because when we go for purchasing, and we have to do accelerated purchasing because the items were very much in demand globally by all countries, we used to start the validation, okay, and using forum, all right, a forum with different virologists all together. These were sort of friendly fora between Europe, also with WHO, with China, and so on. And we were all sharing our validation results, okay? So that when we used to get the same validation showing that particular kits were fraudulent, immediately, then we could inform higher authorities so that with Karen and her group, they could transmit this so that people will not be caught in this particular trap. We had to go fast and choose the right things. And thankfully, all these people working together helped so much. This is not only for kits, but also for particular medicines, for particular devices, and so on. We've seen heat blocks which don't work. We've seen thermocyclers which don't give the right temperatures, and so on. So each time we alert as well, and this alert system has really worked, I think, not only throughout Europe, but worked as well globally. And we've learned a lot as well from each other on the different techniques which really work, like looking at fecal samples, looking at gastric aspirates, at sputum, not only nasopharyngeal swabs. Today we're looking at saliva, we're looking at antigen tests today. So we're all working together, and if we find something which doesn't work, we quickly alarm so that this is transmitted so quickly to our neighbor.
Yes. Also on this point, this is a global effort, not just a European effort.
Yes.
The regulations being postponed, again tying it in. A number of tests that have been developed outside of Europe, from the US, from China, from Japan. There have been local derogations, EU derogations, to get the test into Europe before the test has been validated and re-validated from the European Commission side. So a test which has data that has been published and tried and trusted from the FDA of USA has been accepted, and there have been a number of derogations across Europe. This further shows that we are all in one boat, so to say.
Yeah, the derogations are actually national derogations, so it counts for the particular country which actually granted that national derogation. There are all, what I can say also, for all this pandemic got about the challenge of having CE-marked, which is obviously according to the medical device directives, CE-marked COVID tests. So because of all this communication, the teamwork, guidance even provided by the EC, as early as practically early as April 2020, there were already around 78 different types of RT-PCR tests, 13 antigen tests, over 101 to be perfect, early April 2020, antibody tests, most of which were rapid tests. So all this work with different national competent authorities, even exchange of information, giving the standards, even to highlighting standards to manufacturers, and even highlighting the importance of conformity assessment so that they actually abide with the, all the assessments needed in the directives. This helped to at least have a very good substantial amount of COVID tests available. Obviously what is still a big challenge is, as we said, fraudulent devices, keeping them in check, performance studies, that is what is still challenging all over the globe, but especially for us nationally and in the EU.
Yes, as Karen said, the EU Commission very early on gave out the standards for PPEs, free of charge access. They gave them out to all the national competent authorities of Europe. So any manufacturers or any local derogations could be based upon the standards, and the quality was therefore better assured.
That's right, Julian.
Yes.
This is so important that you are giving us the standards, because when we imported quite a lot of PPEs and tested the standards, we found that not all were up to standard. So this would have put our healthcare workers' safety in peril over there.
Exactly.
So this is so important for safety reasons.
There were even legal prohibitions, so when they see that there were fraudulent tests, national authorities actually issued legal prohibitions in that country, obviously. There were communications where they were obviously where they didn't need, or they thought the competent authority didn't think that a legal prohibition would be needed. They actually had communications on what they think the national strategy should be, or which tests, like self-tests, weren't very, weren't seen as the perfect, obviously, test to use, because it's used by a lay user, so they prefer the healthcare professional actually performing such tests. And then these national derogations were practically to particular tests, or practically for particular tests mainly, and they give a time frame, for example, 6 months. They practically make it available on the market, even though it won't be CE marked, but with the guarantee that in that time frame, example 6 months, the manufacturer continues doing these conformity assessment procedures, etc., so that by the end of that time frame, the product is CE marked, and then only the CE marked product will be available on the market. So that was the...
Unfortunately, this is all the time we have. So I would like once again to thank the panelists, Dr. Barbara, Karen Farrugia, and Professor Anthony Serracino Inglott. And we'll see how the COVID-19 situation develops and how the medical device industry further adapts itself to the scenario.